conveying a message that has enough clarity that your recipient fully understands what you're trying to communicate.
Hmm.
And the bigger picture there is everything else that's involved with communicating. So the nonverbal, um, the body language, the
Hmm.
tone,
Yes.
the format in which that message is being given, all of that impacts effective communication.
Welcome to the Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now, here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Well, hello, and welcome to my podcast. I'm Dr. Stephen Oliver, or Dr. O. My podcast is Taking the Next Step to Leadership. So glad to have you. The purpose of the podcast is to give some tools, techniques, some ideas for younger and newer leaders who are taking that next step in their career. I'm just really glad. I'm very excited. I invite a lot of senior leaders, senior vice presidents, learning leaders, human resource leaders. I also have nursing leaders, authors of books, consultants, and a variety of senior leaders to come in and talk. What they do is they impart information, ideas, thoughts about their careers, how they got to where they are, and the successes that they've had, and maybe even just a little speed bumps that they have. The leaders, the guests also come in and they talk a little bit about some of the areas where they might improve on looking back. So it's my pleasure today to have a good close friend, a long-term friend, Rebecca Haley. Rebecca Haley is Vice President of Human Resources for the Peter Beck community. This is a senior living community in Pennsylvania. And she is also an executive coach. And she's going to tell you a little bit about herself. But Rebecca is a results-driven and strategic leader. She's proven success in her ability to drive change, and she's impacted the bottom line and built trusted relationships within organizations and also within those that she coaches. And she's also a ICF, International Coaching Federation certified coach. So welcome, Rebecca. Really glad to have you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm excited to be here as well.
Good. Really glad to have you. We're going to talk about effective communication skills for leaders. That's going to be your topic and what you're going to impart us with. But just first of all, just tell us a little bit, what have you been up to lately? What are some things that you've been doing in your practice and in your work?
As you mentioned, I work for Peter Becker Community. I'm VP of HR. So I run the whole program for the organization. And then in my spare time, I have an executive coaching business. And I coach leaders, so VPs and above, primarily on reaching their goals and becoming more effective and efficient in a leadership role. That's most of my time. My background, I've been in HR and in healthcare for over 25 years. In fact, that's how you and I initially met.
Right.
We worked in an organization together. My healthcare background is hospitals, rehab, behavioral health, nonprofits, small, medium, and large organizations. So I've run the gamut. I also have an MBA from Temple and a master's in psychology from LaSalle.
Well, that's very, very exciting. And yes, I remember back to those years, and some things have changed and a lot has not changed.
Yes, you're right. Things have and haven't. That's
Oh my God. Well, can you just tell us one thing about Peter Beck Community, something that you do there with the folks who work there?
Sure. So Peter Becker is a senior living organization. We support seniors who are living either independently, need health care, need assisted living. We have over 500 residents who live on our campus. We're in Montgomery County. And our department, when they brought me on, they really needed me to come in and restructure HR. So in the last 3 years I've been here, that's what I've spent my time doing, restructuring the department, making it much more progressive. much more of a partnership with the rest of the organization. Sometimes HR tends to be seen as a afterthought.
Right.
And I've always worked hard in my career and definitely in this organization to have a seat at the table, be involved with strategy, with long-term decisions, and where the organization's going. So that's my role, is really here to support the employees and then make the experience for our residents even better by the quality of employees we hire and the development and the leadership we hopefully instill in them so they're more effective in their roles.
And I love what you said, not being an afterthought, HR. I mean, in my current teaching, and you and I taught HR years ago, it's how to make a partnership with the managers and supervisors and all employees,
Yeah.
and not be that speed bump or the police, what have you. It's a true
Yeah.
partnership. So I
Yeah.
love what you're saying there.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
how about your executive coaching? What are some of the things that people who, executives who come to you, what are they looking for as far
Yeah.
as being coached and, getting some ideas from you?
Sure. So let me just backtrack for a second. So coaching, being in HR and being a leader in HR, you always informally coach. That's part of being in the role.
Yep.
And I think probably about, so I've been doing that over 20 years, but probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I felt that there are probably tools out there that could make me more effective. And so I formally went through the training to become an executive coach. So most of my clients come from across the board, a VP and above, as I mentioned, various industries, but they're really there to get to the next level. So either their supervisor has sent them to me because they're struggling to get to the next level, there's certain skills they're missing, so there's a gap, or they're looking to be promoted, but there's a gap between where they are as a manager or leader and the next role they want to be in. So we work on how do we go from step A to step B, what the challenges are. And I think part of my role is really helping them figure out what the blind spots are. So that's a big part of the coaching.
So what a great connection to the podcast and taking the next step. It's coaching, getting to the next level. Be careful. We may have another podcast coming up on coaching. So the topic today that we wanted to talk about, in your experience, and when we first had a discussion, I wish we had taped then, but effective communications, I think that's one of the biggest challenges everywhere, and not just human resources, not just leaders, even personally, people having challenges with effectively communicating. What is effective communication to you, just to start out with?
And I'll make it very simple, though, to your point, it's a very, I think, complex topic. But essentially, it's conveying a message that has enough clarity that your recipient fully understands what you're trying to communicate. And the bigger picture there is everything else that's involved with communicating. So the nonverbal, the body language, the tone, the format in which that message is being given, all of that impacts effective communication.
Well, that's such a great and sound overview and definition. But what do you think? What do you see in the workplace and over the years? What gets in the way of this effective communication?
I think a big piece of it is that there's a number of issues, but I think in particular, you see managers who don't think that they need to communicate. They think they can talk to you versus with you. And I think that separates a manager from a leader. A manager tends to tell you what to do. A leader will pull you in and have a conversation with you. I think that's a huge difference. But most managers or leaders aren't taught, if you will, to either communicate effectively, or they don't understand the importance or relevance of why communication is so important in business and important, to your point, in life.
Yes, I mean, I like that differentiation you're making. The leader talks with the employee or the people that they're serving versus talking over them. And that's leading into the next question. Why in the world do managers just talk at people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about it. I think about my MBA, and there was never a class on communication. There was
Right.
never a class on effective communication. Once I think you're out there in the working world and you go through Management 101 and management training, they talk a lot about communication, but it's not something you're taught initially in school, probably undergrad business as well. Um, and I also think some managers think of effective communication as a soft skill. There's some managers and leaders who use that term hard skills and soft skills, or they're all skills you need.
Hmm.
And communicating with people, building relationships are huge in regards to connectivity, in regards to employee satisfaction, engagement. So the more you can communicate effectively and talk with somebody, hearing them, listening to them,
Hmm.
reading their body language, the more effective and connected that conversation is going to be.
I mean, that's really wonderful. And just the past 3 days, I had quite a few gatherings with people, wonderful people, good friends, colleagues, but everyone talked over each other. It didn't seem like anybody was listening.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that translated into the workplace and into the social community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but part of feedback is giving, I'm sorry, part of communication is giving feedback. And that's the next piece here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, sounds simple, but what's feedback? I think it's something we need to revisit. What's feedback? And then we'll go into the next question.
Yeah. So feedback is really can be some people use, do you get positive or negative feedback? To me, I use the word, I like to use positive or maybe constructive feedback.
Hmm.
Um, and I think managers who aren't comfortable with giving constructive feedback, um, they're missing the opportunity to develop and grow their employees. And it's
Hmm.
really a disservice to that employee, but it's also a disservice to the organization. Because as a manager, part of your role is giving feedback, and you should be doing consistently. You should be communicating when things are going well, and you should be giving feedback and communicating when things might not be going as well.
Yeah.
And the more you're able to sort of do a little bit of both, your employee doesn't expect you to only come in when there's something negative you want to share. It's a much more balanced relationship, if you will, that you're sharing information. I recognize you did X and Y today. Thank you. Or listen, I'd like to sit down and talk a little bit about that presentation today.
Hmm.
I'd like to have seen it go this way. So there's a way you can communicate constructive feedback, and I think the employees will find it valuable, and I do think it helps an employee grow and develop.
But the big question I always have is why do managers they tend to not say you did a great job today. They just come in and say, you could have done better on this presentation, but sometimes it's not that polite. It's pretty sharp.
Yes,
Why do
yeah,
you believe that managers just take
yeah.
that time to give not so good feedback?
Yeah, I think some people aren't comfortable with conflict. A lot of people aren't comfortable with conflict. And so they'd rather hold off. I'm sure you've had this happen in your lifetime, or of people who have gone to their performance eval and sat down and been given feedback that should have been given to them months ago. So they're surprised. They're sitting down at their annual or their biannual eval, and they're like, wow, why are you bringing this to me now?
Hmm.
We should have been talking about this all along. But I do think many people are not comfortable with conflict. I also think people tend to be people pleasers. They want to be liked. And some managers tend to think that if I don't give negative feedback, I'm going to be liked. Um,
Right. Yep.
that's that's not your job. Your job is to develop and support your employees. And part of that is having to sometimes give feedback that might not be well received.
Hmm. Do you have any examples? Have you heard of any managers or supervisors who's come to you and said that that feedback didn't really go well, whether it's during the performance or an issue? What might be an example? And we don't want any names, but just curious.
Yeah, I won't give too much dirt.
I know.
I think, I can think of many times that I've been in a room with a number of people talking about a situation, and everyone's giving their feedback. As you said earlier, they're talking over each other
Mhm,
because they want to be heard. So they're really not listening. They're more concerned about getting their thoughts out there. And then as people leave the room, you're here whispering, okay, what was the final thing we discussed, or what was our final decision? So
mhm,
I think there's probably many times in the workplace that people do not hear the message. Another one, for example, is when a manager will sit down with an employee and talk about a project. They talk about timelines,
mhm,
deadlines, what the manager is looking for, and the employee and the manager walk out thinking, okay, we're on this. They might not be thinking we're on the same page, but that was agreed upon. This is the timeline, the deadline, the outcome I'm looking for. And weeks go by, there might not be follow up, which is part of the issue.
mhm. Yes.
And they come
Yep.
to the deadline, and what the employee presents is not what the manager
Mhm,
had expected. So again, miscommunication. And there's so many opportunities during that timeline, using that example, that even if there was ineffective communication initially, that could have been rectified down the road.
mhm,
So if the manager had followed up per se with an email saying, I just want to outline what we discussed in the timeline, that could have helped smooth the edges with the issues with communication. Following up a few weeks ahead of time prior to the deadline, just checking in on a regular basis
mhm.
could have made a difference. But that's one I see often, where managers
Yes.
and employees working on a project did not see the same project
Right.
or expectations or outcomes.
And that was gonna lead to another question, but you kind of already answered it. I mean, follow-up is so important,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
like the way that you laid out, keep continuing to follow up. Can the manager create some kind of a software or some scheduling? What might be some additional ways to follow up
Yeah.
with that employee?
Yeah. I think a big piece of this is being intentional.
Hmm.
You really have
Yes.
to be intentional and have an idea of what is the outcome you want it to be. I always suggest and guide the managers and directors I work with to follow up on anything, any
Hmm.
conversation they have with their employees. If it happens to be a performance issue, if it happens to be
Hmm.
a project, but following up after that meeting via email. And I think email, having it in black and white, serves a lot of purposes. Both of you can refer back to it, but there should be bullet points of what we discussed, what the outcome's going to be, and what the timeline's going to be. And then again, being intentional, following up on a regular basis until you meet that deadline, whatever
Hmm.
that timeline might be. I think that's huge in regards to having less chaos and less miscommunication throughout
Hmm.
the project.
So, what's it like, especially for some of the newer managers who have to give tough performance management feedback?
Mhm.
They may be in trouble, and this may be the third or fourth warning. Well, what's that like? Any ideas or suggestions about that?
Yeah. So, Stephen, let me just clarify. You're asking how does the manager handle that, or how does the employee handle it if they've had numerous performance issues?
Well, I mean, to me, that's two
Both.
great questions.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I think first for the manager,
yeah.
they're not experienced.
Yeah.
This employee's in trouble and they've got to talk to them, or they have
Yes.
talked to them,
Yeah.
and now they've got to come back and it's a harder, more difficult conversation.
Mhm.
Suggestions about that?
I think if you're not experienced giving constructive feedback, you should document what you want to say. I
Hmm.
think having an outline of what you want to talk about. So if by chance you get uncomfortable, you get nervous, you get a little stressed, you can refer to your document. I think the other piece of it is use all of the support and the resources in your company. So if
Right.
you've got a supervisor, if you have me in HR, come to us and walk us through what you plan on saying. Document it. So get that support from other leaders in the company, document it before you have that meeting with that employee. I think that goes a long way in being much more prepared and much more comfortable in the conversation.
And I think that's great practice. Practice it. And
Yes.
maybe even get the person you're practicing with to be kind of cranky or
Mhm.
persnickety.
Yes.
Because you never know.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
any suggestions for the employee? I got in trouble and here I am now the third time and my boss is mad. Any
Yeah.
suggestions for
Yeah.
them?
Yeah. You should probably start looking for another job.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm only kidding. I think that in the situation, in the communities we work in and the environment right now from a working standpoint, I think that if you enjoy what you do and you enjoy the people you work with, you've got to find a way to stay in that role, because I think that the job market right now is really tough. So if you
Yeah.
enjoy what you're doing, but you're struggling with performance or conduct, I would probably circle back with your supervisor and have
Mhm.
a very open, transparent conversation about what's going on, what might be getting in the way of them struggling with their work or struggling with their conduct, what's going on that's getting in the way of them being able to do their job effectively.
Yeah, and I do believe I agree with you. I'm joking or not joking. If you're not happy, if this is not the place for you, really do some self-assessment and
Mhm.
consider going somewhere else,
Yeah.
even in a really tough job market. If you're
Yes.
not
Yeah.
happy,
Yeah.
I think everybody is going to be a winner if you move on, but it's
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it's not easy, and I do think when you think about how much time you spend at work,
mhm,
that you should find a place that you enjoy the work, you feel like you're making a difference. That's important for your own sense of
mhm.
well-being and purpose.
Right. Well, another aspect of communication skills, which you and I have talked about before, is active listening.
Hmm.
What is it, and how might we try to
Yeah,
actively listen better?
yeah, yeah. Um, so active listening, again, it seems like a simple term, but it's so complex. But active listening, in from my point of view, is really about being present and being open-minded enough to hear the message from the communicator, the person communicating with you, from their point of view. All of us, when we talk, we're bringing in when we give suggestions or opinions or feedback, we're bringing with us, all of us, we're bringing our
Right.
biases, the environment we work in, the history we've had in our career, all of that is coming to the table. And so we tend to talk and listen from that point of view. So if
Hmm.
you can try to, again, be intentional, and I think being intentional is so important as a leader or a manager, but being very intentional in, let me be open minded and try to hear this message from the other person's point of view. Be
Right.
open to that.
Hmm.
And I think
Um,
being present, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, Stephen,
no,
but I
no,
think
no.
being present, so many times we're in a conversation and we're doing a million other things. We're thinking about other things. We're thinking about the next phone call or the next email we have to send out. We're not really present in front of them.
Well, and I was just thinking about being present, and then these awful things that distract us. This is turned
Uh-huh.
off, by the way. But be
Yeah.
mindful of your phones and
Yeah.
technology. I would
Yeah.
add to all that you just said in active listening. It's so critical and important, and it is amazing getting back to that example of the projects, um, and the manager and the employee goes off thinking one thing, and to me, I just believe they weren't listening to each other and what the goal was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think in that situation too, Stephen, again, sometimes people listen with the goal of responding versus
right.
listening. I'm, as you said earlier, people talking over each other. They just want to get their words out. They
Mhm.
want to be heard versus listening to the other person.
And to me, I would just add another thing: the nonverbals and the what the person didn't say. Every now and then, that's more important. You know as well as I do because we work together in a hospital,
Yeah.
pediatric hospital, and it's what the parents don't say that's so powerful.
It-
Any thoughts about what people don't say in communication?
the body language probably speaks volumes over the words. And I think that's part of my issue with people who send texts or even email is you don't see the body language. So you might interpret what they're saying. You might misinterpret what they're saying via their tone. Sometimes you can misread a tone in an email or even a text, and you think to yourself, are they angry at me? Are they sending this text because they're angry, or they're sending this email when it has nothing to do with it? So I think part of the communication is when they're in front of you via Zoom, Google Meet, whatever it might be, or they're in person. If you have the luxury of having somebody physically in front of you, it's very easy to read their body language and what they're implying. I think that there are certain body mechanics, like crossing your hands across your chest.
Right.
Even if you think you're having an open dialogue, that to me is definitely a sign that somebody is not comfortable really sharing. So especially for hard conversations, I tend to want them in person so I can really see what's going on.
Yes. I did like 3 things yesterday, and they were all face to face, and it made such a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going to jump ahead to one of the ending questions. Do you think communications has gotten better or worse or sideways in 2025? Where do you think communications is today?
Yeah. I think it's probably a little bit of both, meaning that the positive is there's so many ways you can communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And the negative is there's so many ways you can communicate.
Right.
So, I love that you have, again, so many ways you can reach out to somebody with your phone, text, virtual, in person. But that also works against us. As anybody who works in an office, because people can so readily get you, you spend so much of your time responding to emails versus doing work.
Right.
It gets in the way. But I think really on the positive, you can be much more effective. There's so much more you can get to. You can move faster. You can get through projects. I think when I think about technology and like AI or ChatGPT,
Right.
the way you can now integrate that into your work and streamline some of your projects. Or to me, it's almost like a second voice. I can put together a program and run it through ChatGPT, and they can just sort of round the edges and make it beautiful.
Well, this is really powerful, and
Mhm.
again, now you've got a third podcast coming up.
Yeah, but it's ChatGPT is amazing. And when I think from an HR perspective, so many of my policies and procedures and the programs we put together, I can now put it together, a rough cut, run it through ChatGPT, that app, and it comes out, perfect on the other end. On the flip side of that, I see people who will send materials, and I know it wasn't there. Got to know when to tweak it, so it sounds like you.
Right.
And some people will send me programs that they put together, and I can tell that it's ChatGPT driven versus their own
Original.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other side of my life, academics, is how do we know what is ChatGPT and not plagiarized versus original student work, and are they learning? So
yeah.
So I kind of wanted just to come back to one other topic relating to this giving difficult conversations. How can leaders and supervisors give truly honest feedback? Because a lot of times people like to, sugarcoat things, if you will, and not be honest. How can they do that?
They've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's really the bottom line. As I mentioned earlier, most people don't like conflict. And they think that if they have to have that hard conversation, it could lead to an uncomfortable conversation. But if you go into the conversation or go into the meeting with the idea that I am doing a service to this employee, I will help them grow and develop, because of this feedback. And in turn, that's going to help my department. And in turn, it's going to help the organization. I think it's a little easier for a supervisor to be able to tackle those type of conversations when they realize there's a positive to that conversation.
And you kind of just answered kind of one of my last questions, but anything additional about creating this culture of giving ongoing feedback instead of just meeting them at the performance appraisal one time a year?
Yeah. I think if you want to change culture and you want to change it with an organization being more effective, be effective communicators, I think the way you always make change from a culture standpoint is with the leaders. So you want to start with the executive team and get their support and their buy-in to the concept. And I think when it comes to this, there's no executive team that I can imagine wouldn't support being more communicative and more effective at it. But I think they have to walk the talk. They have to model it. So if you want to intentionally be much more communicative, you want to be more effective at it, they need to model it and then model it down to their directors or supervisors, who in turn will also model it to the employees. That's the best way to sort of have that downstream effect.
And that's such a great response and answer. Lead by example. It's got to come from the executive team, and they've got to walk the talk and give that effective feedback on an ongoing basis. I guess my last question is, and this is, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but what might be different in that performance appraisal feedback than the ongoing? Because that's something that I don't think anyone really enjoys, manager or employee enjoys the performance appraisal.
Right. So
what might be some different things in that communication?
Yeah. You mean what other topics would they be talking about?
Or just maybe the approach or the flavor or the way you're communicating in a performance appraisal versus just like the everyday.
Yeah. So the performance eval is going to probably be based on current performance and then future. So what are you currently, how are you doing from a performance standpoint now? And then what are our future goals for you? So it's a little bit of current and future. Most organizations also pull in their core values or their mission because they want to make sure that our employees are living the core values. Core values are usually, and mission are usually tied to your culture. So if you have employees who are living those core values, then you have a better idea if they're really embracing the company's culture. But if a manager's intentional about checking in on their employees, there's going to be no surprises at performance evals. So if you take it upon yourself to say every quarter, I might be talking to my employee on a regular basis about performance and everything else going on in the department and projects and all that. But quarterly, I'm going to talk about the bigger picture. How are things going overall? What type of tools and resources do you need? Do we need to look at your yearly goals and tweak them because things have changed? If a manager were to be that intentional, there would be no surprises at the performance eval once a year, but it also would create a more engaged employee who feels very, very valued by their supervisor.
Well, that's fantastic. And it's something I think you have to practice over and over, even if you've been in the workplace a while. So well, this has been a fantastic conversation. The one thing that I enjoy about working with you and talking with you is we always go into these deep conversations. We did that when we worked together and then when we checked in over the years. And it's just wonderful to go deep in a conversation. So a great comment today about effective communication strategies, ongoing feedback, giving honest feedback, giving praise, giving good things, good news, and then, knowing the differences in the types of communication, and then having leaders lead by example and give that feedback regularly. So really have appreciated your thoughts for our audience. So everybody, again, this is Rebecca Haley, Vice President at Peter Becker Community, a senior living organization in Pennsylvania. And she's also a certified executive coach, helping executives in their needs. So this has just been great. Thank you so very much for coming to the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Stephen.
That's great. And so I wanted to say to all the persons viewing and closing out, thank you for coming and your attention. And if you need any assistance in my consulting, HRC Vision, Learning, Leadership, and Human Resources, feel free to reach out to me. I'm in different social media. If you need assistance with Rebecca Haley, I'm sure she will help you with communications. So thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've been tuning in to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.